I'm trying to teach people a form of art that anybody can do. This is art for anyone who's ever wanted to put a dream on canvas. It's not traditional art, it's not fine art, and I don't try to tell anybody it is.
There are no mistakes, just happy accidents, is a statement that has been synonymous with Bob Ross, the calming voice artist whose afro matches the joy in his paintings. Nevertheless, a secretive period in Bob Ross's life has persisted for a long time. Now, at the age of 57, his son has come forward to reveal a terrible reality that may alter our perception of the cherished artist. Now that we've covered these new details, let's go back to Bob's background and career. Daytona Beach, Florida is the site of Bob Ross's birth on October 29, 1942. Everyone else began to see Bob as the epitome of competence and dedication in the workplace. Ollie, who worked as a waitress, and her husband Jack, who was a carpenter, instilled a strong work ethic in their son. Moving to Orlando, Florida as a child brought Bob closer to nature, laying the groundwork for the strong creative imprint he would later develop. Bob Ross stopped attending classes after 9th grade, when most of his classmates had already graduated from high school. This decision, which was common at the time, enabled him to work alongside his father in the family business of carpentry. While he was here, he honed his fine motor abilities and discovered the delight of achievement. However, tragically, a saw accident brutally cut the tip of his left index finger at that same moment. This incident reminds us of Bob's tenacity, even though it occurred before his love for painting blossomed. Bob Ross began a new chapter in his life in 1961, when he enlisted in the U.S. Air Force at the age of 18. His whole attention and energy were focused on his military duty for the next 20 years. He eventually attained the rank of Master Sergeant. His time in the Air Force was more than a job. It was a formative experience that enriched his life in several ways. The military had a profound impact on Bob, shaping his personality and inspiring the style that would captivate millions of people. His time spent working on medical records and his leadership position as a first sergeant at Eielson Air Force Base in Alaska were formative experiences. Bob's military service provided a striking contrast to the polite guy he became known for. His stern demeanor and exceptional leadership skills earned him renown as a drill sergeant. Nevertheless, he was not suited for this position. He lacked the temperament for the job's requirements, which included yelling and an excessively rigid stance. He remembered being the guy who makes you scrub a latrine, the guy who makes you make your bed, the guy who yells at you if you're late to work. Perhaps this prompted him to seek a more compassionate lifestyle. Without a doubt, his lessons and TV show reflected the essence of that moving experience. The inventive intellect and developing talent of Ross were plainly seen in his early works. He painted on the bottoms of gold pan scraps instead of traditional canvases, since he couldn't afford better materials, turning these functional items into reflections of his stunning landscapes. He dubbed them pancake paintings, and curious sightseers shelled up $25 for a pair. This early success sparked a lifelong passion for painting, and he soon began selling his pieces to local galleries. The defining moment occurred when Ross saw the wet-on-wet method, often known as alla prima. This method was first devised by the German painter Bill Alexander and enabled for the completion of whole paintings in only 30 minutes. It included putting on wet paint in layers, one after the other, without waiting for each one to dry entirely. Because of its unconventionality and the speed with which it allowed Ross to express himself via quick, emotive brushstrokes, this method had a profound impact on Ross. Bob Ross Inc. was founded in the early 1980s, marking the culmination of Ross's artistic achievements and a turning point in his inventiveness. Annette and Walt Kowalski, two of his friends, saw promise in his unconventional style and message, so they worked with him. The Kowalskis dreamed of a larger stage where Ross's artistic abilities might reach more people as his community popularity skyrocketed thanks to his television appearances and art displays. They came up with the concept of a brand new TV series that would highlight his infectious passion for art and the thrilling process of his painting. Ross was quick to agree and couldn't wait to fill us in on the details. Many homes and hearts have been touched by Bob Ross's Happy Little Trees, and their collaboration marked a new chapter in their lives. Regardless, future challenges to the partnership's success are anyone's guess. Premiering in 1983 under the title The Joy of Painting, Ross was a major reason why the program, which aired on PBS stations in the US and subsequently throughout the globe, became a phenomenon. People of all skill levels could relate to his soothing voice and easy movements, which contributed to the show's success. It was astonishing how, in only 30 minutes, Ross turned a blank canvas into an amazingly tranquil environment. The program became more than just an art lesson because of his frequent use of the phrase, "There are no mistakes, just happy accidents," which helped to create an oasis of calm in an otherwise hectic environment. For Ross, the program was a game changer. It made him famous, made him rich, and gave him the warm moniker of the Happy Painter. But most significantly, it gave him the opportunity to realize his artistic goal. He felt an overwhelming sense of pride in his work since he knew it had encouraged many individuals to pick up a paintbrush and create their own whimsical forest scenes. Both Bob Ross and the Kowalskis, who were partners in Bob Ross Inc., reaped financial benefits from the show's popularity. The show's earnings were divided among them. Bob Ross's popularity went beyond the program and inspired a line of branded art supplies, including canvases, brushes, and paints. The co-owners split the proceeds from the selling of these items, which were in high demand from admirers who wanted to recreate his distinctive settings. One source of tension between the partners, nevertheless, was the increasing commercialization of Ross's persona. Regardless, I felt accomplished and fulfilled after finishing the program. Being a part of something that made others happy and inspired them was an honor for them. The chance to collaborate directly with Ross, who was kind and compassionate and put the needs of others above his own, was also highly treasured by them. Despite the show's popularity, Bob Ross and his former tutor Bill Alexander became embroiled in a public battle over the wet paint method, which sparked the Ross and Alexander controversy. The Magic of Oil Painting presenter and German painter Bill Alexander first instructed Bob Ross in the wet-on-wet method. Layers of paint are applied immediately onto the canvas without waiting for each coat to dry entirely. This process is also called the alla prima technique. Alla prima, the wet-on-wet method, has been used since the 1500s. Prime the canvas with a unique white undercoat, magic white, and use a unique palette knife. These were Alexander's distinctive contributions to the method. His life revolved on these innovations. According to an interview Alexander gave to the New York Times in 1991, he laid into Ross, saying, "He betrayed me. I invented wet on wet. I trained him, and he is copying me. What bothers me is not just that he betrayed me, but that he thinks he can do it better." Despite the fact that the fundamental idea had existed before any of them, Alexander believed that Ross had improved upon the method he had taught, and was therefore more successful. While Alexander could have thought Ross was copying him too closely, it's clear that Ross gave the approach his own distinctive twist. His method was different from Alexander's because he used soothing language, put an emphasis on happy accidents, and focused on creating peaceful landscapes. No matter how you slice it, Ross's presenting style clearly struck a chord with more people. A further element of difficulty was added to Bob Ross's achievement by the growing tension in his relationship with Alexander. The public conflict certainly put a damper on things and highlighted the difficulties that may develop in the artistic community. While Bob Ross's life was full with creative achievements, it was also fraught with emotional hardships. His first marriage to Vivian Ridge ended in divorce, which was a major setback. They became good friends in college because to their shared appreciation of art. They were married in 1965 after a successful courtship. Vivian, who was already an accomplished artist before attending Wake Forest University, showed great enthusiasm for art history classes. Robert Stephen Ross was born to them in 1966, and they were both very proud parents. But Bob's claimed adultery led to their 1977 divorce, ending their 12-year marriage. Vivian was unmarried until her death, while Bob swiftly remarried Jane Lee Zanardelli later that year. The breakup was a very private and emotional process for both of them. His already difficult situation became much more so when the untimely death of Jane Ross reduced him to the status of a minority investor. Jane Lee Ross, Bob's second wife, was someone he met while serving in the military. Jane, a civilian worker for the Department of Defense, and Bob had a chance meeting that led to a blossoming romance and marriage in 1977. The devastating news that Jane had cancer tragically ended their joy. Bob was saddened when she died in 1992. In the midst of his many personal troubles, Bob's profound sadness over Jane's death forced him to take a break from shooting The Joy of Painting. This break marked the start of a new chapter in his life, nonetheless. Bob Ross's deep sorrow at Jane's passing led to a dramatic shift in the company's ownership. Bob was one of the members who would get an equal part of her estate upon her death, as stated in the treaty. Because of this, Bob is now just a minority stakeholder in the firm that controls his reputation and legacy. Bob Ross had minimal say in company strategy and decision-making as a minority stakeholder. His ownership position did not accurately represent his vital involvement in the firm due to the equal distribution of the shares. Concerns over the preservation of his legacy and the ownership of the fundamental elements that made him a cherished household name were heightened by the shifting power dynamics, which hinted at forthcoming conflicts and complications within Bob Ross, Inc. The ownership dispute wasn't the only source of friction between Bob Ross and Bob Ross, Inc. An accusation of an affair with Annette Kowalski sparked yet another scandal. Annette, Bob's business partner and a key figure in the launch of his creative career, first crossed paths with him in 1982, not long after she had lost her son, during a painting course. Bob Ross's son Steve speculated that his father's charisma and the success that came with his rising stardom may have enticed Annette. The documentary Bob Ross, Happy Accidents, Betrayal and Greed on Netflix provides fresh insight into the matter, even though Bob has previously rejected any claims of an affair. "Yeah, there was an affair between my father and Annette," Steve Ross says of his father's adultery, and the documentary's archive films back up his statement. Along with other pieces of evidence, a scenario in which Annette tells Bob, "I don't know what you're on, but we should bottle it and sell it," suggests that Annette may have seen Bob Ross as more than just a friend or co-worker. She may have also seen him as a promising business opportunity. As Bob Ross nears the end of his life, he is beset by troubled relationships and growing scandals, which cast doubt on the honesty and reliability of those in his inner circle. One of the major scandals involving Bob Ross and his business partners is his alleged romance with Annette Kowalski. The Kowalskis were well off and had control of the Bob Ross Company when they launched Bob Ross's career. Bob Ross and the Kowalskis' relationship ended due to this power conflict. Bob Ross went through a difficult and traumatic time in his life after receiving the cancer diagnosis. His personal and professional struggles were intensified in 1994 by his diagnosis with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, a more uncommon and severe kind of cancer. The Joy of Painting, Ross's most renowned television program, was produced when he was facing a life-threatening sickness. His perseverance, character, and connection to art were on full display in this production. Ross momentarily told his close group about his condition, but kept it hidden from the broader audience, showing that he valued privacy and control over his personal life. Ross had a history of smoking cigarettes and other health issues, which made his battle with cancer much more difficult. Along with the fact that it was a very aggressive kind of cancer, this was the root of many of the issues. But his faith in the power of art to uplift others and his passion for painting never waned. His unwavering will and tenacity are shown by his persistence in firing even as he was under duress. Still, tensions and worries among the Kowalskis escalated. The Kowalskis, who were Bob Ross's business partners, began to fret about his worsening health. Bob Ross, Happy Accidents, Betrayal and Greed, is a documentary that highlights precisely these problems. The Kowalskis were understandably worried that Ross's illness would have an impact on his ability to film The Joy of Painting. They were keen to keep the public in the dark about his health for fear that it would discourage him from continuing to work on the show and damage the reputation of the Kowalski brand. The source of the troubles between Bob Ross and the Kowalskis was the gradual loss of his friendship, which was brought about by these occurrences and the increasing tensions between them over his name, image, and intellectual property. Bob Ross's troubles just got worse. In the documentary Bob Ross: Happy Accidents, Betrayal, and Greed, it is said that Steve Ross believed that Annette and Walt Kowalski were taking use of his father's reputation in order to circumvent Bob Ross's passing wishes. Bob Ross refused to give up his name and image, even though the Kowalskis were pressuring him to, according to Steve. Over time, these issues became more severe. An example of the severity of the fight and the strength of Bob Ross's beliefs is seen in the documentary when, even though he is frail and on his deathbed, he stubbornly refuses to give up his name. The fact that Bob Ross has refused to give up on his legacy in the face of adversity is indicative of his doggedness and independence. Reports indicate that the Kowalskis' motivation for taking these measures was a desire to safeguard the prosperous enterprise they had established under the Bob Ross name. Bob Ross Inc.'s future profitability and Ross's control over his legacy were jeopardized by his deteriorating health, in their eyes. Their already tense relationship became much more so when Bob Ross and the Kowalskis fought over who might utilize his brand and intellectual property. The public anger and confusion were further heightened when Ross's declining health was seen as an opportunity by the Kowalskis to gain control of his assets, adding fuel to the fire of the already existing court dispute over his inheritance. Bob Ross met his third wife, Linda Brown, a nurse, following his cancer diagnosis and the tough period that followed. A love bond blossomed between them. Bob Ross tragically passed away at the age of 52 from lymphoma-related complications barely 2 months after his 1995 marriage to Linda Brown. Their marriage did not last long. Not only did Bob Ross's terrible death terminate their time together, but it also added to the many personal hardships he had already endured. Bob Ross and Linda Brown had a strong connection that transcended their brief marriage, despite its brief length. After Bob Ross passed away in 1995, a complex and controversial chain of events unfolded involving the Kowalskis, Bob's business associates, and his son Steve. The Kowalskis fought and pursued legal fights throughout that time to maintain their control over Bob Ross Inc. and to safeguard his intellectual property. Bob Ross Inc., the company that broadcast The Joy of Painting show internationally, was taken over by the Kowalskis after Bob Ross's death. This institution made it seem like they were in charge of Bob Ross's legacy and brand. Additionally, they were granted permission to use Ross's likeness, name, and intellectual property. The loss of Steve Ross's father was a devastating blow to his family. Supposedly, the Kowalskis attempted to steal Ross's possessions, including his artwork and art materials, by capitalizing on their close friend's famous reputation. They added insult to injury by claiming the estate had reimbursed them for their business and personal expenses, and that their expenditures had been charged to Ross's business cards. This insistence eventually led to legal disputes and litigation. Bob Ross's son Steve sued his father's business partners, the Kowalskis, in 2017. He wanted nothing more than to carry on his father Bob Ross's reputation and image. However, in 2019, the judge in the federal court ruled in favor of the Kowalskis. The contracts that Bob Ross had executed with the Kowalskis before to his death were crucial to the judgment. The fact that Bob's face, name, and picture were omitted from these contracts does not diminish their ownership of his intellectual property. Based on the court's interpretation, this means that the rights in question were never possessed by the Bob Ross Trust, which was founded subsequently. This further cemented the Kowalskis' dominance over Bob Ross's IP. While they were in charge, Bob Ross Inc. thrived. Joan, who succeeded her parents in 2012, grew the company by capitalizing on Bob Ross's reputation. The Kowalskis kept their grip on Bob Ross Inc. and his legendary image despite legal disputes. The Kowalskis' struggle to maintain ownership of Bob Ross's intellectual property in the wake of his death exemplifies the difficulties in dealing with the legacy and reputation of a cherished public figure. I appreciate you sticking around to the very end. Your support in the form of a like and a subscription would mean the world to me. Goodbye for now.